I found a secret underground bunker beneath my school. I was 14 years old, and I had just moved to a new town for my freshman year of high school. I had a lot of spare time on my hands, and I wasn't really doing anything. So one day I decided to check out the local elementary school, which was right next to my new house. It was a big 2-story brick building that looked kind of creepy. I don't know why, but I was compelled to go into the basement. I went through the front door, and I couldn't help but notice how the stairwell was blocked off with these huge metal bars. It looked like something you would see in a prison or a bank. There was also this really creepy doll hanging from the staircase. I mean, seriously? Why? Why would they put a creepy doll there? After looking around a bit more, I noticed a door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar, and I could see a faint light coming from underneath it. Curiosity got the better of me, so I slowly pushed the door open and made my way down the stairs. As I descended, I started to hear strange noises. It sounded like someone or something was moving around in the darkness below. I hesitated for a moment, but then I continued going down until I reached the bottom. What I saw in front of me was unlike anything I could have imagined. The entire room was filled with desks that were stacked up against the door like some kind of barricade. There were rows and rows of them, and it looked like a scene from a movie. As I approached the door, I noticed that there were some strange symbols carved into the wood. They looked almost alien-like, if that makes sense. I tried to push the door open, but it was no use. It was locked from the other side. I started to feel a sense of dread wash over me. What was this place? More importantly, what was behind that door? I tried to calm myself down and think logically. Maybe it was just a storage room that was off limits to students. But as I looked around, I noticed some things that made no sense. There were desks and chairs scattered around the room, as if people had been working there. And I could see the faint outline of a chalkboard on the wall. It looked like a classroom. But why would they put a classroom in the basement? And why would they lock it off? I continued to explore, and I soon came across a small window. I walked over and looked out, and I realized that I was in a basement, literally underneath the school. I could see the playground, the basketball court, and the parking lot. But what I couldn't see was any way out. It was at that moment that I knew I had stumbled upon something that I was unsupposed to find. I turned off my phone so that I would not be tracked, and I started to make my way back to the entrance. As I climbed the stairs, I heard footsteps behind me. I quickened my pace, and I soon found myself outside. I didn't stop running until I got home. And even now, years later, I still can't shake the feeling that something is watching me. I haven't told anyone about what I found that day, and I'm not sure if I ever will. I'm afraid that if I do, people won't believe me. Do you think there's something sinister going on at that school? Let me know in the comments. And thanks for listening. This has been another Creepypasta. If you liked this story, please leave a like and subscribe for more. And if you didn't, well, I still appreciate you stopping by. Take care. Welcome to my channel. Today we will be reading from the series called The Morgue Drawer. So let's begin. She woke up in complete darkness. Her eyes shot open, and she tried to move, but she couldn't move her arms or her legs. She felt like she was zipped up in something like a mummy. Then she remembered what had happened. She was at the hospital and she had an accident. Next thing she knew, she was in this dark, dank place. She started to panic. What if they had put her in the wrong room? No. What if it was the morgue? She tried to call out for help, but no one answered. Then she felt something with her hand. It was a small protrusion just above where her big toe met her foot. She felt around it and realized that it was a tag of some sort. She wiggled her toes, and the tag moved. She could feel the outline of the letters and numbers through the fabric. Reaching her other foot, she found the same thing. This was the foot that had been injured. The tag was attached to the toe, and it was the same color as the rest of the bag. This meant that it was stitched on before the toe was put into the bag. Ah! But how? How could they have possibly stitched on a tag before she was completely inside the bag? Unless they had turned her feet to the outside before zipping her up. The thought made her sick to her stomach. She strained to remember what the doctor had said. They had prepped her body for burial. They mentioned something about an infection. She remembered them talking about burying her alive. She thought she heard the doctor say there were special circumstances, but she wasn't sure. Was this part of the procedure, or did they make a mistake? She couldn't believe that they would bury her alive. She was scared, but she had to calm down. She was in the morgue, then someone would come in eventually, and she wouldn't be able to scream. She didn't want people to think that she was crazy, and she was at the hospital. She had a feeling that something was wrong when the doctor came in and asked her if she wanted to be buried with her wedding ring. She said yes, because she didn't want to be separated from something that reminded her of happier times. Then the doctor left and never came back. That was odd. Usually doctors came in regularly to check on their patients. When the nurse came in later to change her gown, the woman asked her where the doctor went. The nurse looked at her for a moment and then turned away to hide her face. "I'm sorry, but I can't talk to you right now." The woman tried to call out for help, but the nurse ignored her. That's when she knew something was wrong. Now, lying in the dark, she tried to remember everything that had happened since she arrived at the hospital. She had been in a car accident. She remembered that clearly. She was driving home from her sister's house. She had just picked up her niece from gymnastics. On the way home, she swerved to avoid a pedestrian and hit a tree. The last thing she remembered was the pain in her leg, and then nothing. She wondered if her parents had been notified. It would be like them to keep things from her, but they would never let anything happen to her. Wait a minute, she realized. Her parents weren't alive. Who would have told the police about her accident? Maybe that's why the doctor offered to let her keep her wedding ring. They probably thought she was dead. The realization made her cry out in fear. What would happen if she was buried alive? Would she suffocate? Oh, how long would it take? Questions raced through her mind, but she soon stopped thinking about it. There was no use worrying about what-ifs. She needed a plan. She needed to get out of that bag. She couldn't believe she was actually worried about being buried alive. People who worried about silly things like that were the same ones who carried around those little bottled water sets. You know the ones, she thought, smiling faintly. It didn't matter that she was stuck in a body bag. She had her trusty water bottle set. All she had to do was find the zipper. She wiggled her toes until she found the opening. She wriggled her foot out of the bag and then reached for the zipper. It was right where she thought it would be. Taking a deep breath, she started to unzip the bag. Welcome to my channel. Today's scary story is called The Church Pew. I grew up in a small town. It was so small that when the train came through, which was once a week, it was a major event. The one business that thrived in our little town was the church. Every single night there would be some sort of function going on there. Bingo, prayer group, Bible study, youth group, you name it. And the building was always packed. Our church had one of those old school potlucks every Wednesday night. And if you weren't there at 6 p.m. when the doors opened, you were going to get the last pick of food because everybody in town would show up. My mom made some killer lasagna, by the way. Just saying. But tonight I want to tell you about what happened to me when I woke up in the church pew. So one day I got sick with the flu, and since I wasn't driving, my mom took me to the doctor. She dropped me off, sat in the waiting room with me, and then went out into the hall to talk to the nurse while I waited for the doctor. The nurse came back to get me and said, "You're all done. Your mom says she'll be right out." So I paid and went out into the hall. That's when I saw my mom talking to a priest. I didn't think anything of it. I just figured she was chatting with the one person she knew from the church. So I walked toward the door. They were standing by, smiling at each other, and I heard them say something along the lines of, "Oh, it's so good to see your face. Haven't seen you in so long, and yeah, we should catch up sometime." Then they both looked over at me and they stopped talking. My mom looked really uncomfortable, like she was caught doing something she shouldn't have been doing. She gave me this look that said, "I want to explain, but not right now." And then we left. When we got home, I went straight to my room. I couldn't stop thinking about what my mom was doing with that priest. I mean, they practically grew up together. They went to church functions together all the time, but I never saw them alone. The thought of my mom and the priest hooking up had my mind churning. Was that why she was so worried? Was she seeing him behind my dad's back? Had she been seeing him for a long time? Was that why she was talking to him so openly? I couldn't get any sleep, so at 3 a.m. I got up to go to the bathroom. That's when I heard a knock on my window. Startled, I looked out to see a woman in a long black dress with a white collar standing on my lawn. She knocked again, and I cautiously unlocked the window. She asked if I was so-and-so's child. I said yes, but how do you know my name? She replied, "I need to speak with you about your mother." Said she's asleep, I think. "Why do you want to talk to her?" she said. because I believe she needs God's help. I could see that she was crying, and I felt bad for her. I knew she was from the church. I recognized her dress. It was the same one the women wore when they did the funeral ritual. I remember my mom telling me once that the dress symbolized death. It was a symbol of death and the afterlife. I remember thinking, what a strange thing to wear. So I asked the woman, what do you mean by that? She said, your mother needs God's help. She's in danger. Before I could ask any more questions, she walked away from the window and down my driveway. Puzzled, I locked my window and went back to bed. I kept tossing and turning. I couldn't get comfortable. I finally fell asleep only to be awoken by the sound of singing. Oh, I knew that song. It was the funeral song. Startled, I shot out of bed and ran to my window. I flung it open and looked out to see the woman in the black dress standing at the end of my driveway with two other women. They were singing the funeral song at the top of their lungs, and it sounded beautiful. But their faces, they were pale white, and their eyes were soulless. Like they weren't even there. I don't want to scare you here, but I swear their eyes were glowing red in the darkness. And then I noticed something else. All the lights in my neighborhood were out. Street lights, the house lights, even the neon sign at the gas station across the street. It was pitch black outside. Looking back at the women, I realized they were closer now. They were walking toward my front door. Slammed my window shut and ran to hide in my closet. Then I heard knocking. First it was slow. 1 knock, 2 knocks. Then it started getting faster. Knock, 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 knock. Faster. Knock, 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 knock. Faster still, and then pounding. Someone was pounding on my front door. I don't want to exaggerate, but it sounded like someone was trying to break in. I hid in my closet until the commotion outside my window stopped. Then I slowly opened my closet door and tiptoed to my window to peer out. What I saw made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Outside, directly under my window, was a large crowd of people, and they were all facing the house, but none of them were making a sound. They weren't moving either. They were completely still. As I watched, I saw the woman in the black dress walk into the center of the crowd. She raised her arms and bowed her head. Then the rest of the people bowed their heads too, and I could have sworn their heads were facing the wrong direction. Like they weren't looking down. I don't know, it was weird. Then the door to my house opened and I heard my mom's voice. Who's out there? Silence. Then she turned on the porch light and stepped onto the porch, and that's when I saw it. All the people were still there, but now they were all staring at my mom. I mean, it was like they were hypnotized or something. They weren't making a sound, but I could feel the stares burning into my mom. Suddenly she looked up and saw me in the window. She screamed and ran toward me. I don't remember what happened after that. Must have passed out because the next thing I remember is waking up in my bed with the sun shining in my face. I got up and ran to my window. All the people were gone, but there were 2 new things. On the ground in front of my house were 12 white roses, and on my lawn was a single rose bush with 12 white roses on it. To this day, no one in my family has ever spoken of the rose bush. And whenever I dream of those women, I wake up with the chills. Thank you for watching. Would you dare go to sleep in a church? Or maybe you wouldn't be scared if you knew the truth about the church. I'll leave that up to you. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be looking at a Reddit post from a user who woke up in a stranger-esque living room. As you read this story, please keep in mind that it is unedited and uncensored. The original post has been left exactly as it was when it was published. I hope that you enjoy it. I was home alone for Christmas this year. All of my family flew back to our country of origin to see their aging grandparents. I had work the next day, so I stayed behind. I was working from home, so I didn't mind being alone. On Christmas Eve, I started drinking and watching TV. I don't remember what time it was, but it must have been late because when I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was the framed photo of a family on the wall staring at me. I was lying on a couch in what appeared to be a middle-class living room. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't my living room. As I sat up, I noticed more photos of the same family on the walls around me. There were photos of them as babies, photos of them on their 10th birthday, graduating high school and whatnot. None of these photos included the man that I assumed was the father. It was only in one photo, and he looked like he was in his mid to late 30s. The rest of the photos showed a couple with 3 kids who looked to be between the ages of 8 and 16. Again, all of these photos were framed and hung on the walls. I got up and walked around to try to figure out where I was and how I got there. That is when I saw a half-empty bottle of wine on the coffee table in front of the couch I had been sleeping on. I recognized the label. It was the same bottle of wine that I had bought to drink with my dinner the night before. The last thing I remembered was drinking that bottle of wine and then calling my mom to wish her Merry Christmas. Apparently after that, I left my apartment and somehow made my way to this random person's house. I searched the room for a phone or something so that I could call an Uber and go home. That's when I spotted a tablet on the other couch. I picked it up and saw that it was unlocked and on the home screen. I quickly found the Uber app and requested one. Then I walked out to the front of the house to wait for it. When the Uber driver arrived, I explained my situation to him, and he was a complete champ. He said that he would drive me around until I figured out where I lived. Bless that guy. While I was in the back seat of the Uber and still on the phone with the driver, I tried to piece together how I got to this random house. I knew that I had left my apartment building because I received an access denied notification from my smart lock. I use a fingerprint scanner to enter my apartment. It doesn't send notifications when I scan my finger to enter, but it does send one when I use the keypad to enter manually. I had used the keypad the night before because my hands were full when I came home. My smart lock also sends a notification whenever someone who is a permanent resident enters the building using the keypad. I checked my notifications and there were none. So no one entered the building using my keypad, which meant that I entered the building using my keypad. So here's what we know so far. I left my apartment at some point after 7 p.m., called my mom, drank the entire bottle of wine that I bought somehow made. My way to this random house, fell asleep on the couch, and woke up only to find myself in a stranger's house. The Uber driver dropped me off around the corner from my apartment. I thanked him and hurried the rest of the way home. My girlfriend and I have been binge-watching videos about real-life mystery stories and unsolved cases. There are so many creepy cases out there, and sometimes they even keep you up at night. Anyways, thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more stories like this. Have a great day. Bye. Welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be telling the story of a truck driver who woke up in the middle of the road without any memory of what had happened. Tommy had been driving for many years. He knew every inch of the roads and all the tricks to making the best time. Tommy loved his job. Every day he would leave his home in Tennessee, drive through the night, and deliver his cargo before the sun went down. Then he would do it all over again. It was a lonely life, but it paid well, and Tommy didn't mind. He enjoyed the quiet hum of the engine, the smooth ride of the highway, and the feeling of freedom that came with being on the open road. But one day Tommy's world turned upside down. He woke up in the middle of the road, and the last thing he remembered was leaving Tennessee. Tommy sat up and looked around. Where was his truck? How did he get here? The more he tried to remember, the worse his headache got. He couldn't remember anything. The last thing he remembered was leaving Tennessee. It was a clear, cloudless night, and the road was empty. He was alone. He tried to flag down a passing car, but they all kept driving past him without stopping. Tommy stood up and started walking. He needed to get out of the road. Cars were whizzing past him, and he was scared of getting hit. Finally, a woman stopped her car and asked if he was okay. Tommy explained his situation, and she called the police. When the police arrived, they took Tommy to the nearest hospital. He needed to get checked out. They ran some tests and gave him painkillers. Then they told him he could go home. But Tommy was unfrom around here, and he didn't know anyone who could take care of him. So the police drove him back to the highway so he could continue his journey. But when he got there, he found out his truck was missing. It was nowhere to be found. Without a truck, Tommy couldn't continue his journey. He called the police again, and they told him they were going to look into it. But in the meantime, he needed to find somewhere to stay. A kind woman who had witnessed the whole thing took pity on Tommy. She drove him to her home and let him stay there for the night. In the morning, Tommy woke up, and the lady drove him to a diner. He needed to get something to eat. After a few hours, the police called him and told him they had found his truck. They had located it about 10 miles away. From where they found Tommy, it seems like someone had abandoned it in a ditch. But other than some scratches, it wasn't damaged. Tommy was relieved to hear that, but he still had no idea how he got there, or why someone would abandon his truck. As the days passed, Tommy grew more and more worried. He couldn't remember anything about the accident, and the police were starting to give him funny looks. They had never seen anything like this happen before. No one could remember seeing Tommy's truck on the road or hitting anything. It was like he had vanished into thin air. Then one day, a breakthrough. An old lady who lived near where they found the truck called the police. She said she had seen a man who looked like Tommy lying next to the road. She didn't stop because she thought he was drunk. But now she was starting to feel guilty. She hadn't meant to leave him there. The police contacted Tommy and told him about the lady. He immediately got in his truck and drove to her house. When he saw the old lady, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. He finally had an answer. But when he asked her what had happened, she only shook her head. She said she couldn't remember. It was like she had blocked it out of her mind. But then, something strange happened. As Tommy was talking to the old lady, he suddenly remembered. He remembered driving through the night, delivering his cargo, and then stopping for a break. He had pulled off at the side of the road and decided to lie down for a bit. But when he woke up, he had no idea where he was. He tried to stand up but fell over. That's when the old lady had come across him. Tommy thanked the old lady and called the police. They had found him, and that was all that mattered. But as he hung up the phone, he noticed something strange. His truck was filled with thousands of dollars worth of cargo, but now it was empty. Someone had stolen his stuff while he was unconscious. Tommy was devastated. Not only had he been in an accident, but now he was out of a job. He didn't know what he was going to do. But as he stepped out of the truck, he saw something. A single tire track in the mud. The police had missed it, but Tommy saw it clearly. This was the mark left by a large truck. Someone had used their truck to push him off the road. And with that realization, Tommy's anger grew. He may not remember everything, but one thing was clear. He was not the kind of person to just sit back and take it. He would find whoever did this to him and make them pay. Well, that's all for today. If you like this story, please subscribe and comment. Until next time. Welcome back to my channel, The Carnival Tent. A college student was taking a nap in between classes when he heard the sound of drums and trumpets. Puzzled, he looked out the window and saw a large circus tent had been set up overnight. He decided to go check it out. As he got closer, he could hear the sounds of children laughing and screaming, as well as the music. It was coming from inside the tent. Curious, he walked right in. Inside, all of the rides were running. There were bright lights flashing everywhere. The sounds of the calliope and carousel music filled his ears. There were also several other students from his school there, but none of them seemed to know how or why the tent got there. Still, they were enjoying the free food, games, and rides that were being offered. The student even won a goldfish, which he thought was quite funny. He then started to walk towards the exit, but as he did, he noticed a group of people dressed like they were in a circus. They were standing right by the entrance. As he got closer, he realized they were staring directly at him. The student froze in his tracks. He didn't know what to do. Should he run? Maybe he should hide. What if these people were dangerous? As the ringleader of the group began to approach him, the student felt his heart start to race. He started to panic. The man was getting closer and closer, and as he passed by, he quickly grabbed the student's arm and pulled him into the tent. The student tried to scream, but no sound came out. The man put his hand over his mouth and dragged him deeper into the tent. Once they were far enough away from everyone else, the man finally let go of the student and turned around. With a sinister smile on his face, he said, "You're the one we've been waiting for." Confused, the student could only reply, "What? What do you mean?" The man then gestured to the tent around them. "This isn't a dream, it's not a hallucination, this is real." The student took a deep breath and tried to calm down. "I don't understand any of this. What is going on here? Who are you?" The man leaned in close to him and whispered, "You have something that belongs to us. I'll give it back and no one gets hurt." The student's eyes widened in fear. He had no idea what the man was talking about, but he could tell by the look on his face that it wasn't good. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. The man's smile disappeared, and he took a step towards the student. "You sure about that? 'Cause we're going to have to search you?" Before the student could react, the man grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and started to shake him. "Where is it? Where is the crystal ball?" The student's mind raced. Crystal ball. What crystal ball? He had no idea what the man was talking about. But from the way he was acting, he knew that if he didn't give him whatever it was he was looking for, he was in serious trouble. The man suddenly stopped shaking him and turned to the others. "He doesn't have it. Let's bring him to the leader. Maybe he'll know what to do." They all nodded their heads in agreement and surrounded the student, each grabbing him by an arm and pulling him along. They dragged him through the tent and out the other side. As he looked back, he could see the rides and games still running, but no one was playing them anymore. All he saw were the empty booths and rides. He was the only person there. Or maybe he was with the circus. Maybe he was the one who belonged to them. The end. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to tell you about the creepiest motel room that I have ever stayed in. I travel all the time for work and I often stay at different motels or hotels. But this one was by far the strangest place that I have ever stayed. I was driving through the desert and it was getting late and I hadn't found a place to stay yet. So I started looking on my phone for a motel, and I found one about 20 minutes off the highway. It was called the Desert Moon Motel. It looked pretty run down, but it had good reviews, so I figured it would be a good place to stay. When I got there, it was almost midnight, and the only light on was the neon light from the sign out front. There were no other cars around, and it looked like most of the rooms were empty. When I walked into the lobby, I noticed that everything was really dusty, and there were cobwebs everywhere. The carpet was old and stained, and there was a big hole in the ceiling. I walked up to the front desk and pressed the call button, but it didn't do anything. I waited a few minutes, and then I heard some shuffling around, and a woman's voice said, "Just a second." Then a very slow-moving woman came up to the front desk, looked at me and said, "Can I help you?" Her name tag said Patty. Patty slowly started checking me in and gave me my key. She didn't make any conversation or anything. She just handed over the key and stared at me. When I finally got to my room, it was very strange. It was like a time capsule or something. Everything was exactly the same as it would have been in the 1970s. The room was very dark and the curtains were closed. The only light in the room was coming from the neon light outside, which gave the whole room a very eerie feel. The bedspread had a weird pattern on it, and the carpet was very dirty. There was a big pile of towels on the table, and when I pulled one away, I noticed that underneath there was an ashtray full of cigarettes that still had some that were still burning in it. I immediately got freaked out and thought to myself, what if the person who was staying here before me never actually checked out? What if they just disappeared or something? Then I decided to look around the rest of the room to see if there was anything else strange. In the bathroom, I noticed that the shower curtain had a strange stain on it. It looked like blood. Then I looked in the mirror and noticed that the water was running. I turned around and saw that the sink faucet was dripping very slowly. I got out of there as fast as I could and went back to my car. I didn't even unpack my stuff, just kept my stuff in the car and drove to a different motel. In the morning, I got up early and drove back to the Desert Moon Motel to get my things. But when I got there, everything was gone. All my stuff was gone. The room was completely empty. It was like I had never even been there. I asked Patty at the front desk what happened to my stuff, but she acted like she had no idea what I was talking about. She said, "I don't know what you're talking about. You need to leave." I insisted that I needed to get my stuff back, but she just kept telling me to leave. I went back to my room one more time to try the door, but it was locked now. I pounded on the door, but nobody answered. I tried to call the room, but the phone was disconnected. I was starting to get really scared at this point, so I ran back to my car and drove away. I still don't know what happened to my stuff. Maybe Patty took it. But why would she take it? And where did she go? I've never seen her again. Sometimes I think that maybe I didn't check out at all, and that SY my stuff is still there, but I'm pretty sure I did check out because I remember driving to a different motel and unpacking my stuff. Whatever happened, it was definitely creepy. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Welcome to my channel. And today, we have another chilling tale from the depths of our subscribers' nightmares. This is the frozen lake. A man woke up on a frozen lake at dawn. He was barefoot, and the ice beneath him cracked as he shifted. Disoriented and scared, he tried to stand but slipped and fell back onto the unforgiving surface. With a jolt, he looked around for help, but there was no one in sight. In the distance, he could hear the faint sounds of a nearby town, but it seemed like an eternity away. The sun began to rise, casting an eerie glow on the snow-covered landscape. As the light grew stronger, he noticed a small cottage in the distance, a tiny speck of warmth in the vast expanse of white. With newfound determination, he struggled to his feet and began walking towards the cottage, each step a victory against the cold and despair. As he got closer, the sound of crackling fire reached him, mingling with the sweet smell of pine and wood smoke. Hope surged through him. Maybe he'd make it after all. As he drew closer still, he saw a woman standing at the edge of the lake, her silhouette outlined against the warm light spilling from the cottage. Relief washed over him. Help was really at hand. But then the woman did something that made his blood run cold. She didn't move. She just stood there motionless, watching him with an unblinking stare. Panic seized him. Was she beckoning him closer, or was she a harbinger of something more sinister? His mind raced, his heart pounded in his chest, and he hesitated, unsure what to do next. Should he keep going, or turn back and try to find another way to safety? Time seemed to hang in the balance, each second stretching into an eternity, as he stood there, torn between hope and fear. Then the woman moved. She took a step forward, her eyes never leaving his. And as she did, the fire in the cottage flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. It felt like an eternity, but she kept coming closer, and he couldn't bring himself to look away. The sound of breaking ice echoed on the lake as she emerged from the water, her footsteps crunching on the frozen surface. He wanted to call out to her, to ask for help, but his voice seemed trapped in his throat. All he could do was watch as she approached, her form slowly taking shape in the firelight. With every step, the suspense grew, tightening its icy grip around his heart. As she finally drew near, he saw not a savior, but a specter of death. Her face was pale and drawn, her eyes vacant and soulless. In that moment, he understood. This was no ordinary woman. This was the embodiment of the lake's icy grip, come to claim him as its own. Terror surged through him, raw and primal, and he scrambled back, his eyes frantically searching for an escape, but the ice offered no purchase. His hands clawed at the smooth surface, but he slipped and fell, the air knocked from his lungs. And then she was upon him, her touch freezing, her presence numbing. The last thing he saw was the cottage, its warm glow now, a mocking ember in the vast expanse of his despair. The fire went out, as the first rays of sunlight glinted off the frozen lake. A single footprint appeared in the ice, a grim memento of the man's final moments. It was perfectly preserved, a stark reminder of the icy fate that awaited anyone who dared to wander too close to the frozen lake. And that's our story. Do you believe in things like this? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, please hit the thumbs up button. The locked school bus, a teenager, opened his eyes. Where am I? He looked around. He was on a school bus. But how did he get there? The last thing he remembered was arguing with his parents about getting a later curfew. Then his dad had grabbed him by the collar and shoved him into the bathroom, into the shower. And then everything went black. But why? Why was he on this bus? He got up, but as he did, he noticed something horrifying. Every single seat on the bus was filled with lifeless, grinning mannequins. Their glassy eyes stared blankly ahead, their mouths stretched into grotesque smiles. Some of them were even holding up their hands as if they were waving at him. It was like something out of a nightmare. Panic started to rise within him, but he pushed it down. I need to get out of here, he thought. He ran to the front of the bus, but the door was locked. He tried the other doors, but they were all locked too. Then he looked out the window. They were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dark woods. There wasn't a house or a building anywhere in sight. And no one was passing by on the road. He was completely alone. He started to bang on the windows, but as he did, he saw something that made him freeze. The moment his knuckles made contact with the glass, a handprint appeared on the other side. Someone or something was on the other side of the window, watching him. Screamed and jumped back, his heart pounding in his chest. Then he noticed something else. The handprint wasn't on the outside of the window, it was on the inside. That meant whatever was on the other side of the window wasn't outside the bus, it was inside. But if that was the case, then why couldn't he open the door? As he looked around the bus, he noticed something else. Each of the mannequins was subtly different. Some were holding books, others were holding instruments. One was even holding a meat cleaver. But they all had one thing in common. Their eyes were all different. Some were blank, Others glowed red, and some seemed to have a hypnotic swirling pattern in their depths. He shuddered. What kind of sick person would do this? Then he saw it. One of the mannequins was holding up a sign. He walked over to it and read, "Welcome to my playground." My playground? Who was talking about a playground? Why? Why did they bring him here? Suddenly he heard a voice. "Having fun, Billy?" He spun around to see one of the mannequins moving. Its head was turning, its mouth was opening and closing. I thought you were just a mannequin," he stammered. "We're not mannequins," the figure said. "We're your worst nightmare." Billy screamed as the figure started to move towards him. It was moving so fast he could barely see it. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. Then he saw it again. It was standing right in front of him, its face inches from his. What do you want?" he whispered, his voice shaking. "I want to play," it hissed. "Let's play a game. If you can find the key to unlock this bus, you can go free," it said, reaching out a hand and pressing something into his palm. It was a key. "But if you can't," well, it said, its grin widening, "then you'll join us in our eternal slumber." With that, it vanished. Billy looked down at the key. It was old and rusty. As he turned it over in his hand, he saw a faint glow coming from one side. He rode it closer to his eyes and saw an inscription. "Time is running out." What did that mean? Was this game only for him? He started to search the bus, looking everywhere, checked under the seats, behind the curtains, even in the toilet. Finally, he looked up. Maybe the answer was right in front of him. He stood on his tippy toes and looked up at the ceiling. In the dim light, he saw it. An inscription was carved into the metal. He reached up and traced it with his finger. It was a clock face. He turned the hands until they lined up with the key. The key fit perfectly. He turned it, and the lock clicked open. He ran to the door and flung it open. He didn't look back. He just ran and didn't stop until he reached the safety of his home. When he finally stopped, he realized he was shaking. He took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. But as he did, he heard a voice. That was boring. He spun around to see one of the mannequins standing in his doorway, its eyes glowing red. "It's time for round 2, it said with a grin. To be continued. Welcome to my channel. Today we look at the story of a man who woke up from the dead in a funeral home. Man refuses to accept his fate. In 2016, an elderly gentleman from Texas named Claudel Carter decided it was time to plan his funeral. He went to a local funeral home to make arrangements so that when he died, he would have a good send-off. He made all the necessary plans and paid for everything in advance, even picked out the coffin that he wanted to be buried in. It was a very expensive wooden coffin with the name Carter inscribed on the front. A few months later, Claudel became very ill and was admitted to a nearby hospital. As his condition worsened, the doctors told his family that there was nothing more they could do. They had done everything they could, and now it was simply a matter of time before he passed away. So they took him off life support, and he was allowed to pass away peacefully in his sleep. When this happened, his family immediately contacted the funeral home to come and collect his body. They arrived at the hospital shortly after and took the body away. Claudel's family was devastated by the loss. They all gathered together at the funeral home to pay their respects and say goodbye to their loved one. The next day, the funeral was held, and it was one of the most somber occasions the family had ever experienced. After the funeral, Claudel's body was placed in his coffin and lowered into the grave. The family said their final goodbyes, and then the grave was filled in. However, what they did not know was that Claudel was still alive. When he was in the hospital, the doctors had mistakenly kept him on life support. And although his family didn't know it, he was actually still breathing. 1 week after the funeral, someone was working on a flower bed near the cemetery when they noticed something strange. There was a flower on the surface of the grave that shouldn't have been there. It was the same type of flower that had been placed on the coffin during the funeral. As the person working on the flower bed looked closer, they saw that there were other flowers on the grave that hadn't been there the day before. They immediately called the police and told them what they had found. The police arrived and began investigating. At first they thought that it was just a case of some teenagers being disrespectful and placing the flowers on the grave. However, they soon realized that this was not the case. After carefully examining the grave, they were able to determine that it had been dug up recently. They also found footprints near the grave, which indicated that whoever had dug it up had only done so a short time ago. As the police were investigating, a local pastor who had conducted the funeral got a call from the police, asking him if he knew anything about the grave being dug up. He told the police that he had no idea why anyone would dig up the grave, but he agreed to go to the cemetery with them to see what was going on. When the pastor arrived at the cemetery, he was shocked to see that the grave had been dug up and that the coffin was missing. He immediately began to panic, thinking that the body must have been stolen by grave robbers. Meanwhile, the police continued to investigate. They were able to track down the people who had delivered the flowers to the funeral home, and they confirmed that they had only delivered the flowers and had not tampered with the grave. The police then searched the area for any other clues, and eventually they found a witness who had seen two men digging up the grave the night before. The police were able to use this information to track down the two men who had dug up the grave. It turned out that they had done so because they believed that Claudel was still alive. One of the men had been a friend of Claudel's, and he had heard rumors that Claudel might still be alive. The two men had decided to investigate, and they had indeed discovered that Claudel was still breathing inside the coffin. When the police arrived at the scene, they were shocked to find Claudel sitting up in the coffin, surrounded by flowers and staring at them in disbelief. The two men who had dug up the grave were immediately arrested and charged with trespassing and disturbing the remains. Claudel was taken to the hospital where he was treated for his injuries and eventually released. In the end, the family was furious with the funeral home for allowing their loved one to be buried alive. They demanded an explanation and compensation for their pain and suffering. The funeral home eventually agreed to pay a settlement to the family in order to make things right. Now, death is a painful and difficult subject to deal with. But it's important to remember that even in the midst of our grief, there is always hope. The story of Claude Carter is a reminder that even when things seem their darkest, there is always light at the end of the tunnel. We may not always understand what happens in this life, but we can trust that everything will work out for the best in the end. What are your thoughts on this case? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching. What is the scariest place you've ever traveled? In a previous video, I told you about the creepy town that doesn't exist, but this one takes the cake. In 2016, a Redditor woke up in the middle of an abandoned mall in China. At first, they thought they were having a vivid dream. The automatic doors slid open, and they just walked through them without realizing it was a mall. Inside, nearly every store was closed. When they entered one of them, they saw mannequins dressed like they were going to a rave, Redditor wrote. I don't want to sound like an idiot, but at first I thought maybe this was some sort of dream. It was then that they heard a noise which brought them back to reality. They described it as the quietest sound you could possibly imagine. As they continued to walk through the mall, the Redditor noticed that the fluorescent lights were buzzing, but no one was there to be seen. Then they saw the escalators moving by themselves. They recorded the moment and posted it online. First, they received a lot of hate. Other Redditors thought it was a hoax. It wasn't until they posted a video that everyone believed them. This begs the question, how did such a large structure get abandoned? To answer that, we need to go back to 2007. When the grand opening of Jinjiang Mall took place in the city of Fuzhou. At the time, it was the largest shopping mall in the whole country. Just look at all those people. But business wasn't great. See, there were other malls nearby, so this one wasn't very unique. Plus, the layout was terrible. Most of the stores were located on the upper floors, with only a handful on the ground level. So unless someone had a good reason to go upstairs, they wouldn't. It was too much of a hassle. After a few years, many of the stores closed and the mall became mostly empty. Eventually, the owners decided to demolish it. But before they could, part of the roof collapsed. Here's footage of what that looked like. Since then, no one has set foot inside. The city wanted to clear out the remaining debris, but the owner refused, citing safety concerns. Apparently, they plan to reopen the mall one day. But for now, it remains abandoned. When the Redditor woke up inside, they found signs that said the mall would reopen. In March of 2014, so perhaps they were having a dream about that day or maybe something else entirely. Now let's take a look at some of the comments. One person wrote, "If this happened to me, I would sprint to the automatic doors and not stop running until I got outside." Yeah, that makes sense. Another said, "I love the idea of urban exploration, but this scares the crap out of me." Same. One person even offered an explanation. Maybe she sat on a bench and fell asleep. Someone stole her stuff. and then pushed her off the bench to make it look like a crazy person did it. But there are also a lot of people who believe it's fake. Take this comment, for example. A mall made out of cardboard boxes would probably collapse with a bit of wind, let alone an earthquake or a strong person running through it. Well, here's some more footage of the mall collapsing. So I don't think it's cardboard, another said. There's no way this is real. If it was, wouldn't the windows be boarded up? Great comment. If it was me, I would definitely board up the windows. But remember, the Redditor posted this in 2016, 3 years after the roof partially collapsed. By that time, the windows would have been broken anyway. What Redditor came up with a name for this phenomenon? He called it the uncanny valley of architecture. Basically, when a building is half complete, it gives off a weird vibe. Lastly, let's look at some photos from inside the mall. As you can see, everything is covered in dust. There's trash everywhere and a lot of graffiti. The Redditor said that the second floor was completely blocked off, which makes sense, since a large part of the roof caved in right above it. The escalators were the creepiest part, though. Imagine riding one of those and it suddenly stops. Then you realize there's no one around, and you're trapped inside an abandoned mall. Thanks for watching. You dare visit this place? Let me know in the comments section below. As always, thanks for watching. Bye. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to look at the wrong bedroom. A man was driving home late one night when suddenly he got a flat tire. Pulled off the highway and onto a deserted gravel road where he proceeded to change the tire. After getting the flat tire changed, he continued on his way home. But soon he realized that the roads were extremely unfamiliar. Thinking that maybe he had taken a wrong turn somewhere, he turned around and headed back the way he came. But still, he could not recognize any of the streets. Eventually, he came across what looked like a friendly house with some lights on in the front. So he decided to knock on the door and ask for directions. A man opened the door, and the lost driver explained his predicament. The man thought for a moment. "Well, this is awkward," he finally said, "but I think you might be at my house." He invited the driver in for a cup of coffee while they figured things out. And as they talked, the driver noticed a photograph on the wall of the other man's house. It was a picture of him and his wife and kids. And it dawned on him that the people in the picture were the same people that had answered the door when he knocked. "I'm sorry," he stammered, "but this is weird. You look exactly like me. Your wife looks exactly like my wife. Your kids look exactly like my kids. They even have the same names as our kids." The host just smiled and said, "Don't worry about it. It happens all the time." Then he turned back to his family and asked them, "Hey, would you guys mind terribly if we kept these guys for dinner? We can get him caught up on all the gossip we missed, and then after we can help him figure out how to get home." Everyone agreed. And so the two men sat down to dinner together. As the evening wore on, they compared stories about their lives. And although there were some similarities, they were clearly two completely different people. Both men were accountants, for example. One was married with 3 kids, and the other was single with no kids. One was a teetotaler, and the other drank several beers during dinner. At one point, the men even switched places, and the driver slept in the other man's bed. In the morning, the driver got up early, went to the bathroom, and shaved. As he was shaving, he looked at himself in the mirror and noticed something strange. He didn't recognize the person staring back at him. He looked familiar, but he wasn't sure how. He walked out of the bathroom and into the bedroom. But before he could get dressed, the other man entered the room. "Oh, here's your toothbrush," the other man said awkwardly. "You can, brush your teeth in there." He pointed to the bathroom. The driver then did something crazy. He looked at the picture on the wall that was hanging above the bed. It was a picture of the two of them with their families. But when he looked at the photo more closely, he noticed that both he and the other man had different wives in the picture. In fact, neither of them was married to the woman who had answered the door or the kids that had greeted him. The kids even had different names. "So, which one of us is in the wrong bedroom?" he asked. "Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and found yourself in a strange place? If so, what was it? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching. Welcome to my channel. This is the scariest place on earth. In the small town of Ashton, Keynes, England, there is a playground that has become a terrifying place for anyone who dares go near it after dark. The playground, which is located in a park called King George's Field, is completely deserted after sunset, or so you would think. One night, a local resident who wishes to remain anonymous was awoken in the middle of the night by what sounded like screams in the wind. When he looked out of his bedroom window, he saw what he described as dozens of swings moving back and forth in the darkness, just like they had been pushed by some invisible force. My mom and I got up and went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. It was then that we heard a strange noise coming from outside. We looked out of the window and saw dozens of swings moving in the wind. They were going back and forth, but there wasn't a single person on any of them. If this were to happen now, I would grab my phone and start recording. But back then, the man didn't have a camera on him, and so he had no way of capturing the disturbing scene. He said, "I couldn't believe my eyes. There were about 30 or 40 swings all moving at the same time, but there was not a soul there. It was eerie and scary at the same time." He continued, "It wasn't windy at all, so I don't know how the swings were being pushed. It sounded like someone was pushing them, but when my wife and I went out into the garden, there was no one there. It went on for about 5 minutes, then suddenly stopped, just as quickly as it started. It was as if a giant hand had come in and pushed them all at once." Now, you might be thinking that these swings were simply pushed by a gentle breeze, but this is highly unlikely. You see, the playground equipment was firmly secured to the ground with bolts. Furthermore, the residents of Ashton Keynes have reported seeing strange things happening at the playground at night for years, long before the modern playground equipment was installed. For example, back in 2016, a mother named Laura Atkins took her children to the playground during the day. She said that she and her friends had always enjoyed playing on the swings as children. But that day, as soon as they stepped foot on the playground, they heard chains dragging metal moans. Then they noticed a tire swing moving by itself. After that, they decided to run away as fast as they could. Laura later wrote on Facebook, "I've never been so scared in my life. It was really creepy and I couldn't get out of there quick enough. It felt like something from The Shining." So what exactly is going on at this playground? Some people believe that the area is haunted by the ghost of a little girl who died in a nearby house fire many years ago. Others say that the playground is built on top of an ancient burial ground, that the restless spirits of the dead are using it as their own private playground. One local legend claims that a group of teenagers used to hang out at the playground at night, and that they accidentally unleashed a demonic entity while trying to summon the devil. Whatever the case may be, it's clear that this playground is cursed, and that anyone who dares go near it after dark runs the risk of being haunted forever. The man who witnessed the moving swings said, "It was a shame because it has a nice park during the day, and you never expect anything to go on at night. I won't be going anywhere near that playground after dark ever again. It really was scary." So, if you're anywhere near Ashton Keynes, be sure to stay away from the playground at night. Who knows what you might encounter? And if you do decide to go there, don't forget to bring a camera along because you won't believe what you see. Now with that said, it's time to make your voice heard. What do you think is haunting the playground in Ashton Keynes? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to see more short videos, then stay tuned for more content.